in this lesson, we'll talk a little bit more about the orientation of our micromeshes. So for this one, let's go ahead and bring in a project file. I'm going to go to File, and let's open up a project file. And in our ZBrush Files folder, let's bring in this 03 Begin Z project. So we'll go ahead and open that up. It's going to bring in this sort of creature. And you can see actually he has a strip of geometry on his back. I've actually just extracted that from his low res. And so if we take a look at that strip of geometry, and let me just solo that, you can see that just has a few polygons coming up along his back. So, you could create this yourself using the topology tools. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. There's a variety of ways that you could create this, or you could just extract it from the actual low-res geometry. I've made this a separate subtool. So let's take a look now. If we want to, let's say, add some horns or spikes along this guy's back. So what you do is you'd extract this strip of geometry where you want them to go, and then you'd also create the horns themselves. So for this, you can see I've actually just created a simple horn here. And really, you could do this with Dynamesh. You could bring up create a sphere, maybe take a half sphere, pull it up with your move, and then start sculpting. Very simple model to create. You just go in and start doing some sculpting on that until you get the look that you want. It could be a big, kind of a bony bump. It could be more of a spike. Really, whatever you want. Okay, and I just have it open at the bottom. So let's say now that I want to apply this as a micro mesh to that strip to create those horns along his back. So I could go to our creature, and with that back strip selected, I can come down to Geometry, and let's go to Micro Mesh, and let's select the horn. Okay, it's going to give us that warning again, so we'll make sure to turn on our Micro Mesh. Now let's take a look at what's happened here. And let me actually turn off the creature himself. Okay, so let's go ahead and render this. So looking at this, you can see the horns aren't really doing what we want them to do, right? They're kind of laying on the side, and some are going this way and some are going that way. So what we can do first is set the orientation for this horn. So if we go back to the horn itself, let's come down to Preview, and we can see that it's actually oriented based on the side. And what we want to do is change it to be oriented from the top. So I'm going to just rotate it in this preview window. I'll hold Shift to snap it to the top, and then I'm just going to store that. Okay, so that's letting it know that we want to actually use that as sort of the up and down, what's pointing towards us. And so we'll go back to now our back strip, and there it is. Okay, so with that now selected, we'll go back to Micro Mesh, and let's select our horn again. We haven't saved it or anything, we've just changed that orientation. Let's go to Best Preview Render, and now you can see, well, that's much better. They're all standing up off the surface. But you can see these are sort of pointing that way, and this one's pointing that way, this one's pointing sideways, as are those. So what we want to do is kind of align the orientation of all of these faces. So we'll go Spin Edge, Align Edge first, because we want to align everything in one line. So we'll go ahead and preview render that. Okay, great. So now they're all pointed in the same direction. We've aligned them appropriately. The problem is they're all pointed in the wrong direction. They're all pointing forward. And what we want to do is actually point them the other way. So we want them to be pointing sort of down his back. So from this point, we've hit Align Edge, and it's kind of straightened everything out. Next, we'll hit Spin Edge. Let's go ahead and render that. Now you can see they've spun 90 degrees. So now they're all pointing sideways. So we'll spin it one more time. All right, now they're all pointing in the right direction. So from this point, let me go ahead and turn on our creature body. And let's do another BPR. So at this point, you can tell they're sort of buried inside of his body. So we're still basing this on the actual polygons. And so we could use Inflate if we wanted to, or we could come in here with the Move brush And let's turn on symmetry. And we can start to bring these out a little bit. Okay, and re-render until we get them, the right depth that we want those. All right, so once we've got those positioned where we want them, if we want to now save that as geometry, we can just go convert BPR to geo, and it'll save that out as new geometry. We can then come in with our different materials or colors and sort of fill in that new geometry with our color. So select MRGB. Let's go ahead and fill that. Or we could poly paint it or do whatever we want. Okay. Now this is going to accomplish, in this case, much the same thing if we were to draw a curve out on the surface and use the insert mesh to insert those horns. Okay, it's just another way of doing things. We're placing polygons versus placing things along a curve. So in some cases it may work better for you. In some cases it may be better to use the curve-based method. It really is up to you. I'm just trying to give you a good idea of what you can do with the micro mesh. So that's one thing you can do, and I just wanted to be able to show you kind of the ability that you have to align the edges if things aren't facing the right direction, and also to spin them appropriately. This will also work if you hide certain polygons and you just want to spin a certain section, or you just want to align a certain section. You can select those polygons and spin those edges, and it'll only affect those particular polygons. So if you have some sort of a grid and you want some of them to go one way and some of them to go the other, you could make that a selection and align them, spin them that way. Okay, so the next thing that we want to talk about is some ways that we can create a tiled mesh. So one of the cool things about using micro mesh is the fact that we can create something more complex out of a simple section of tileable geometry. So we'll take a look at that process in the next lesson.